They actually had the worst cyber attack ever. And it started with literally a phishing email. Guy in shipping clicked on a link in an email. Machine started running slowly. It's kind of like a Friday afternoon, so he didn't think too much of it. And said, I'm leaving for the day anyway. I'll deal with it on Monday. Um, Before that happened, the entire company got shut down. And when I say the entire company, nobody could work. No email, no phones, no shipping, no inventory, no way to log into any systems. And that one email in 90 seconds infected 10,000 machines.
Hi, thanks for joining us for another edition of Brava Talks. This special extended edition is titled Cybersecurity, Tales of Survival. To navigate this engaging discussion, we're joined by Jeff Hart, the head of business at Brava Cayman, Steve McIntosh, the CEO of Cayman Finance, and Rich Casselberry, the vice president of architecture and security at ATN International. Let's hear from the guys.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining today's Cayman Finance webinar, which we have entitled Cybersecurity, Tales of Survival. I'm delighted to be joined today by my good friend, Jeff Hart, head of business at Brava right here in Cayman. Jeff?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, happy to be here and look forward to a good conversation.
Awesome. My new friend, Chief Security Officer, author, expert, cybersecurity veteran, and member of the extended Brava family, Mr. Rich Casselberry, joining us all the way from Maine.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
How are you, Rich?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. So we'll be taking questions throughout the webinar. If anyone has questions, please post them in the chat. And we're going to talk for a little bit and hear some of Richie's war stories, if you like, and bring Jeff in to talk about the services provided by Brava, but we're going to get to the questions towards the end. So post your questions in the chat, and our good friend Jennifer Steinberg, who's on the call, will moderate those for us and let us know what questions we've got towards the end. So Jeff, I want to start with you. You're no stranger to our members as a long-time resident of Cayman, but Brava is a relatively new brand here in the Cayman Islands. This wasn't just a rebrand, but more of an evolution into a broader range of network and data services, including cyber, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So about 2 months ago, we just did a complete rebrand of Brava. But important to note is Brava is basically the evolution of Logic Business. So Logic Business, what you know as a brand as Logic in Cayman, has now evolved into this much bigger B2B or business brand that offers a range of services. So everything from the core connectivity that you have today to unified communications and collaboration to cloud computing. And then the last pillar that we have, which is core to this discussion, is our Stronghold pillar, which is really focused around cybersecurity. But Steve, the main message around that is that we're here to simplify how businesses do business today in this ever emerging, demanding, technological, compliant world that we live in today.
Yes, sir. All right, Rich, Chief Security Officer at ATN, which is the parent company of Brava, and you have a storied background in technology and cybersecurity. I feel bad calling you a veteran of cybersecurity because it makes you sound like a character from the Terminator. And as some people will know me from my background in HR and recruitment, and one thing that's always fascinated me is how people get into this line of work and how they did. Were you someone who had a passion for this and got into it, or were you someone who got into it and then developed a passion for it?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? I've been in the industry for a long time, and long before we had a cybersecurity industry. So I sort of more fell into it, I guess, but definitely had a passion for the technology. And I do feel like the Terminator character sometimes, so totally appropriate to call me that.
Well, we'll be looking to you when Skynet takes over, Rich. To be honest, maybe you can come down here and be a general in the fight.
I know you only say good things about AI because it could be listening now, so you gotta be careful.
Oh, now you tell me. Was there one specific moment where you decided, I'm going to get into cybersecurity? Was there anything you can trace it back to, a spark of inspiration?
No, I mean, probably the biggest thing was years ago, I read this book called The Cuckoo's Egg. It was by a guy named Clifford Stoll, and Clifford Stoll knew nothing about security and knew nothing about computers. He was an astronomer of all things who worked at a university, and his grant funding ran out, and so they wanted to keep him, so they gave him a job in the computer thing, working on programming. And his first task was figure out why the billing system has been off by 73 cents. And so if you ever get a chance to read the book, it's an amazing story because he's not technology savvy. So there's no acronyms, there's no boring jargon. It's just this poor guy trying to figure out why he's off by 73 cents. And it turns out to be this huge spy thriller where I think Russian hackers had gotten into this top secret research lab, and he saw it. He was probably one of the first people to ever deal with a cyber incident. And there was no one to call. Like, he's literally going through the phone book trying to call people. Right. And he called the local police. And they're like, well, that's not us. And he called the FBI and like, well, that's international. Like, we don't deal with international. And he called the CIA. And like, he finally got people to listen to him. But that's kind of probably what got me the most started into it. Like, it was just such a fascinating
real story.
It's a true story,
It's a real story.
Yep.
Well, I think, I mean, that certainly resonates with me as a recovering accountant. That the 73 cents story, I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I've had trying to track down less than $1 on a balance sheet. But so this has worked out very well for you. So you spent many years in the financial industry, didn't you, before ATN?
Yeah, so I've been with ATN just about 4.5 years. Before that, I was 5 years at Liberty Mutual, which is an $80 billion, 50,000 person company. And then before that, I was at a network infrastructure and security company running network infrastructure and security. So yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and yeah, it's always amazing to think back about some of the stories and some of the things that we've seen through the years.
Well, tell us. I mean, tell us a story that. Imagine I'm a small business owner. What's the worst horror story you can tell me? Like, you know, scare me, keep me awake at night here. So
I'll tell you two, right? Because the first story is almost so overwhelming, it's hard to relate to. This happened back in 2017, 2018, so relatively recent. There's this little company called Maersk. You might have heard of them. They do a little bit of shipping. I think like 25% of the global shipping in the world.
Rings a bell.
Yeah. You can't go buy a ship and not see a Maersk container on top of it. I think they actually had the worst cyber attack ever, and it started with literally a phishing email. Guy in shipping clicked on a link in an email. Machine started running slowly. It's kind of like a Friday afternoon, so he didn't think too much of it. And said, I'm leaving for the day anyway. I'll deal with it on Monday. Before that happened, the entire company got shut down. And when I say the entire company, nobody could work. No email, no phones, no shipping, no inventory, no way to log into any systems. And you know, that one email in 90 seconds infected 10,000 machines, cost them billions of dollars. It took them months to recover. Honestly, the only reason they could recover as fast as they could, they had one system out of 200. So there's this thing called domain controllers where all of the usernames and passwords and configurations of systems get stored. Typically it gets replicated globally, so a lot of people weren't backing them up at the time because there's 200 copies, right? So what, one goes down, I'll just use one of the other 199. This malware actually infected all of them except for one that happened to have a hardware failure and was offline. So I can just imagine them like very carefully like trying to move this box in place and get it fixed because it was the last known copy. So it's a pretty horrible scenario. It's probably definitely the worst that's happened to date. But again, it's a little bit overwhelming, right? Like, we don't have 10,000 employees, so clearly that would never happen to us. The other story, a little more close to home, a little bit probably more relatable. My family knows I work in computers, right? They don't really know a whole lot more than that. But one night my uncle calls me, or my aunt calls me, because my uncle was on the phone with Microsoft, who had called him because his machine was running slow and they wanted to help him. Now, for me, like, that raises an awful lot of alarm bells because I have tried to call Microsoft before.
Right.
And they have never once called me.
Yeah, they're not calling you to offer support. Hey,
no, I mean, I wish they were that good. But yeah, they weren't. And so he had them remotely fixing his machine And he was concerned because it had been 20 minutes and he thought Microsoft would be good. It wouldn't take them as long. What did I think?
Hmm.
And I said, what I think you should unplug your computer, right? Turn the power off, call the bank, because while you're talking to me, they're stealing all your money. And he's like, I don't really want to do that. That's super inconvenient. Like, then I got to change all my credit card numbers. I'm like,
I see.
Do what you want, but I'm just telling you, you're losing money while we're speaking. And he didn't listen to me. And he lost, $500 or $1,000. So luckily, not life altering, but probably he would have preferred to have called the bank when I told him to and kept the $1,000. But yeah, it happens to everybody, right? I mean, I think no one's really immune from it, whether you're a 200,000 person company or, somebody's uncle or aunt.
And the worst thing about the Maersk story is that they couldn't fire that guy who'd left for the weekend because they were depending on him to fix it, I'm assuming.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think so. I think it took them a while to figure out who it was. I don't know if they ever fired the guy or not, but yeah, I mean, the guy had no idea he did anything wrong, right? I clicked on an email that wasn't really anything important and just kind of moved on.
Yeah, yeah. And where do you start thinking about cyber risk as a business owner or a CEO? I mean, that's kind of the thing I struggle with is where do you start and where do you stop? Because I can imagine all kinds of scenarios. And if you just said to me, think about the worst thing you can imagine, where do I start thinking about risk?
Yeah. And I get paid to be paranoid, right? So I have a lot of nightmares thinking about scenarios that could happen. The two easiest things, user training, right? Something like 94% of attacks start with a phishing email. So getting people to be a little bit paranoid about emails, not just clicking on links. I sort of jokingly, whenever I present to executives, particularly my own company, right, I will usually start with, I apologize in advance because someday you're really going to ask me to send you an Amazon gift card, and I am going to be incredibly rude because that's one of the most common phishing attacks, right? Like, this is a CEO. I'm in a meeting. Please send me some Amazon gift cards to give to customers. It is never the CEO.
That exact scenario happened to us last year. New member of staff, someone contacted them to say, to pretend to be me and ask them to buy $1,000 of PlayStation gift vouchers. And they did, but it was in the handover where the staff member started to get suspicious and luckily reached out to someone. And the worst thing about that story is that they were PlayStation gift cards. And I'm an Xbox guy. So what am I going to do with those? So we might still have some, by the way, if anyone wants any PlayStation gift cards. I'm not quite sure what happened to those. But that's been one of the, we had another brush with cybersecurity in my last company where I was approving bank transactions, and the first one I came across was the name of a law firm that I'd never heard of, and called up the financial controller, and our financial controller said, well, remember you sent me that email with that bill attached? And I was like, no, I did not. This is a phishing. I don't know if would that be a phishing attempt?
Yeah, they sort of merge phishing with what they call business email compromise. So business email compromise is sort of a subset of it. But I actually had HR reach out to me and say, did you really want us to change your direct deposit info? I'm like, no, I did not. Thank you for calling me.
Yeah, right. So it just shows you the scale of things that can go wrong. And I think I totted up maybe 4 cybersecurity incidents that I've experienced in my time as a leader. And they were all related to human error and nothing crazy or, that you couldn't imagine yourself doing or any reasonable person. Jeff, I want to bring you into the conversation, and I'm not going to ask you why you do what you do, because I know you quite well, and I know it's about the fame and the flash lifestyle. Is that
right?
Okay, good.
Of course.
What I do want to talk to you about is how the landscape here in Cayman has kind of evolved over the last few years to make cybersecurity a much more salient problem for companies here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've seen that, and I've seen it personally just being in Cayman for quite a few years, is the complexity of it now, right? So, you look at Cayman as being, one of the largest financial services hubs in the world. And Rich, you tell me, being top 5 or wherever we are on that ranking list right now, if I'm a cyber criminal, does that put Cayman as the top 5, or where does that rank them as, a potential target? So that is certainly a concern, and it brings more of the severity and kind of importance around making sure that, we're doing what we need to do as organization and as partners and technology vendors in market to support the economy and support that kind of demand of what we're seeing in the market. So that alone has changed significantly as we continue to grow as an economy and financial services in Cayman.
Yeah, so we're kind of attracting more attention now.
100%. Yeah. And the conversations that we're having at the boardroom table with our customers is more around, this is a financial services industry that is, you were in the staffing HR industry, Steve, like a lot of accountants in Cayman, right? A lot of accountants are now, having and holding the responsibility of IT. They're being asked to understand, obviously all angles of compliance, regulatory, GDPR.
And I can tell you that if the shoe was on the other foot and we had the IT guys doing the accounts, we would immediately the problem with that. No offense.
No, none taken. You wouldn't want it.
So that sounds like pure folly. But we've also had some sort of evolution in the regulatory landscape and laws as well here, right? So, and that's something that Brava can help with.
100%. So that is again core to the initial part of our discussions, is around obviously what the organization needs to achieve from a compliance and regulatory perspective, and then the journey of how to get there. So wherever the organization is in that journey, whether it's right from the start, a new domiciled company starting up in Cayman, we can engage from that perspective to help, define your governance framework, define your security framework, your ICT or your cybersecurity policies. But in addition to that, take it right down the journey, right into what is your technology stack? How are you training and educating your staff, et cetera? So very much core to the Brava Stronghold security offerings.
Got you. And what I'm always thinking, putting myself in the mindset of a small business owner, which I was for many years, is that I'm just so busy that I don't have time for cybersecurity. If I had, I also get the folly of, because it's such a risk, and you can imagine so many scenarios where it could actually be something of a disaster. If I had 1 hour and $1,000 to implement some kind of cybersecurity, to do something about cybersecurity, what should I do with that 1 hour and that $1,000?
No, and I think this comes up a lot. And to be honest, I've digested this same kind of question because I've been at the forefront. This happened in cloud computing, and now it's happening in cybersecurity, where you're trying to convince people and small businesses that you need this technology and it costs a lot. So tap in and buy it. And you're finding that the adoption rate is very slow. Why is the adoption rate slow? It's slow because traditionally small businesses didn't have access to enterprise IT on a small business budget, right? So they couldn't get the cool technologies and what have you that's going to safeguard them well. That's changed now significantly. So and not to give the sales product pitch from Brava, but we would like to think that small business owners have no issue calling us to order an internet connection, because it's a commodity. I need it, powers my business, allows me to access email.
You got to get it from somewhere.
Yeah, and it should be no different for cybersecurity. So, you asked the question, what are the main things? You need a firewall, right? You need endpoint protection. You need two-factor authentication to secure your users accessing your network. And you need to train your people on cybersecurity. That out of the box is part of what we offer as kind of an ICT bundle for small businesses. But it should be as simple. You don't have to get bogged down in the technology and what have you. And
you do all that stuff, right?
Exactly.
So I just call up Brava and say, we want to take cybersecurity seriously. And you come in and do that. But can you reassure me that I'm not going to have some massive form to fill out or anything like that? Because that's always my worst nightmare, when I reach out to someone to say, I would like you to help me solve a problem, and they give me a bigger problem in return. And when you're a business owner, that kind of stuff is a lot of friction, a lot of commitment. And
again, that's all part of what we try to do, is really simplify how you tap in and consume these services. So really simplifying it. It's in a 1 hour, you mentioned, like in a 1 hour conversation, we can do a quick discovery, map out what you need and what your requirements are, and easily deploy.
And no forms.
No, there might be a few forms that we will help you fill out, but there is a few questions along the way.
Okay, I'll just ask me the questions and I'll answer them on the phone. For some reason, a conversation never feels like work, but a form feels like insurmountable. You ever notice that?
100%.
This is probably one for Rich actually, but I I mean these days everything is so fragmented. If you look at every company has a tech stack, right? That's the cool name for this thing now that we use 15 different platforms. I mean, just at Cayman Finance, we use Asana for projects, we use Active Campaign for contacts, we use Calendly for meetings, Microsoft 365, which, you know, then has another dozen apps within that type form. The list is just goes on and on and on. And what I always wonder is this helping our cybersecurity preparedness, or is it creating more vulnerability, more kind of points of failure?
Yeah, it depends, right? I mean, if you look at the Microsoft, Google, Amazon, right, they make billions of dollars selling people cloud and doing security for it. If they were to have an issue, right, that would be a real revenue drop, right? If they lost 30% of $1 billion, that's real money.
Yeah.
They tend to take it pretty seriously. They've got the best controls. They're doing a really, really good job. At the end of the day, they're a big target too, right? Because if I can break into Microsoft or Google or Amazon, as a criminal, I get access to a lot of
I've got
stuff.
a billion new customers.
But they're generally good. What I will say is, just because somebody is in the cloud doesn't mean they're doing the right thing. So early cloud days, we were sort of naive and we thought, oh, they're cloud, they must be doing all the right things. And we were talking to the CEO of one of the companies, and they were a very custom reporting platform that we used, and it was very, very niche and just not a lot of users. But we're talking to the CEO, which sounded pretty impressive, about security. And as he sort of walked through, like what made up his tech stack, he made some comment about, well, yeah, this runs on my laptop in my living room, but don't panic because I'm thinking about buying a UPS so the power outages won't cause as much disruption. And
So we're good. So we're good.
yeah, it sort of dawned on me that maybe he wasn't doing all of the same things like Google and Microsoft and Amazon were, which in my head I just assumed he's in the cloud. He must be doing all of that. And so,
Yeah, right.
yeah, you definitely need to ask questions and make sure that people are doing the right things. But I don't think it's necessarily bad. Again, it can be a bigger target, but the ones that are bigger targets generally have better controls.
The thing that worries me about this is that, you know, because we've got 10 members of staff and we've got 15 different platforms, and all of those platforms have their own logins because, you know, there are compatibility issues. There's all kinds of information in platforms that, you know, just managing all those passwords is kind of a lot of work. I noticed that there was mention of a password manager. And is this like a full-time member of staff, or is that something I could get someone to do part-time? What do they do? What do they do?
Yeah. So a password manager actually will store all of your passwords for you securely so that only you can get to them. It allows you to have good passwords, unique passwords for all of the different systems, right? I think people aren't good at remembering passwords. They're even worse when they're long passwords or they have special characters. And you know, just a little hint for passwords, just because you have special characters in them doesn't mean it's a good password. So we used to see what they call password spraying attempts, where attackers would just pick a username, pick a password, and they would just run through the list of passwords. 50,000 employees, it was amazing to me how many people had fall 2019 as their password. Wow. Capitalizing the F, making the A and @ sign does not fool anybody, right? And when spring rolls around and you change it to spring 20, doesn't help, right?
Yeah.
And so password managers make it so you can get a strong password, not have to worry about remembering it, and, you know, be much more secure.
Yeah. So what do you recommend? Like your first pet in the street you grew up on, or?
Oh yeah, those are great.
Okay.
Yeah, that always makes me cringe when people use those for security questions. I'm lucky enough, I'm old enough that my first car was a Datsun, which is not in business anymore, so nobody would guess that one until now when I just said it on the call. But another little tip though, it doesn't actually have to be your first car. You can mix them up. You can use your dog's name for your first car. But yeah, those are pretty horrible to guess.
And yeah, no one would have guessed that our first car was a Datsun. I don't know if they still make cars. Is there any particular app that is just like a red rag to the bull with you, Rich? Like, is there any app that you find out that your customers are using and you're like, stop it immediately?
Yeah, but the list changes every day, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to sort of keep track of it. I mean, if you follow the security news, which probably a lot of people don't, but I do because I'm a geek and that's what I get into. Like, you know, Avanti has been in the news a lot lately. They make a VPN appliance, and it turned out that it was compromised, and not everybody patched it as quickly as they should have. And
Mm.
so, nation state attackers were using that. So, the list changes day to day, hour to hour as people find new vulnerabilities and report on them. So it's not that easy as say stop using TeamViewer, right?
Yeah. We've talked about apps, but what about hardware? Because I think this is also a big issue. So in my mind, we have 10 members of staff, but what I'm not factoring into that is that we probably have 40 devices between iPhones and smartphones and smartwatches. I mean, where do you draw the line on this? And is there a boundary? I mean, because we could sort of secure our laptops, but everybody's also getting lots of information and accessing apps on their phone. Is that all part of the service?
Yeah, I think it depends on how paranoid you need to be, right? I think different companies have different risk tolerances, right? The risk to somebody selling tacos out of their truck is probably different than the National Security Agency, right?
Sorry.
So you definitely need to right size it, and that's one of the things that Brava can help with for sure. Um, but generally, what I tell people is unless you control the device, or at least can strongly influence it, maybe don't give it access to your data. Right. One of the things that always scares me with laptops in particular, but this could just as easily be phones, if the hard drive isn't encrypted, and I sort of tell the story of two laptops whenever I talk to people about why it's so important. One laptop, right, two laptops, one of them is encrypted, it's got all the security tools on it, it's managed by IT. The other one is somebody bought it at the store and they're using it. They both get lost, right? The first laptop with encryption and all the security tools is an inconvenience, right? Whoever the user is has to get a new laptop. That's, as much as we in IT say it's not a big deal, it's a big deal, right? It's
Yeah.
painful to reinstall all your apps and
Yeah.
put the icons in the right spot, and
Yeah. But the second one, you're Hunter Biden.
the second one's a
Yeah.
big deal. Yeah, it can go from, it can be $1.5 million breach, right? Because now you don't know what's on that laptop, so you have to assume the worst, which can be really bad, right? And so, yeah, security controls are a pain. Sometimes they can slow stuff down, but it's a difference between, I got to buy a new $2,000 laptop and it costs the company $1.5 million and a $2,000 laptop still. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really, really big deal to make sure you have that division of personal and corporate.
Yeah, right. Jeff, this might be one for you, but I've been wondering about the kind of interplay between cybersecurity and cyber risk insurance. Do you ever get involved in that stuff? I mean, I'm on the board of at least one company where they've talked about the need to have cyber risk insurance because a customer insisted on it. And then because you have to get the insurance policy, the insurance company forces you to do all the cybersecurity, which is almost like a service from the insurance company. It's like, here's a huge commitment device. We're going to force you to do this thing.
Yeah, again, that's one of the new kind of trends that we're seeing is that's becoming more of the conversation early in the stages of our discovery with clients. Rich, I don't know if you have anything further to add on that on the insurance side of things, but I know that it's definitely a key conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. Cyber insurance used to be really easy to get, right? You'd pick up the phone, you'd call your local insurance company and say, I want $1 million of cyber insurance. And you can almost hear them flipping through the pages of the book, right? Like, $1 million, that's $50,000.
Yeah, and it was probably money for old rope at one point.
Yeah, but it used to be that easy. But the last 2 or 3 years, like, they have faced a lot of losses by being a little too open with giving people cyber insurance. And now it's significantly different, right? I tell people if you need to renew your cyber insurance, you should probably start 3 months early. Because they are going to want to know a lot about your environment and the controls and the policies and the standards. And it's definitely not as easy as it used to be.
And you're going to need all the time to remediate any issues before you actually get on risk.
Yep.
Yeah. So do you actually collaborate or cooperate with the insurance companies generally? I mean, or do they all have similar standards, or does every insurance company have a different protocol that you have to work towards?
I mean, I think they're relatively standard. I mean, the forms, right, to your point, are different, right? You can't just have a conversation. You got to fill the form out. But a lot of the questions are the same, right? Are you patching, and how quickly are you patching? You know, are you patching once a year, or are you patching once a week? You know, how
often
old is
should
your
I be
technology?
patching, Rich? And
So the funny
what is
thing with
patching exactly?
Yeah, so so patching is just making sure you have the latest version with all of the security fixes in it. We actually patch daily, though if you are up to date, nothing happens.
Right,
And
and that's what
patching,
you want.
yeah,
That's what you want.
but patching's disruptive, right? I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes we reboot your machine, sometimes
Yeah.
we reboot your machine in the middle of a Zoom
Oh, this is
session, which
yeah,
is yeah, knock
you're
on
making
wood,
me
right?
break out in a cold sweat here, Rich, to be honest, because this is I'm the guy who leaves his laptop open for like 3 weeks in a row until it grinds to a halt, and I have no choice but to restart it, and then it takes an hour and a half to download everything and update it. So yeah, okay, so this is not good practice.
Yeah,
But
we wouldn't recommend that one, yeah.
I mean, am I naive to think that as a Mac user, I'm less at risk?
Yeah, I mean that nicely. But I mean, there
I had
are
a
less
horrible
Mac.
feeling when you said that.
There's probably less Mac vulnerabilities that are well known because it's a smaller environment, right? 10% of the
Right.
machines are Macs, or 15%. I don't know the real stat, but there's definitely Mac
Especially in
vulnerabilities.
business. Yeah, it's kind of a hassle to use a Mac, to be honest, because there are lots of compatibility issues. It's getting slightly better, but I can't help it. I just, you know, those cryptic error messages on Microsoft machines just drive me up the wall. I think we're going to take a look and see if we've got questions from the audience. From Jennifer, what we got any questions that you want to put to Rich or Jeff?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And so we had a few questions that came in as people were registering as well. That one has just come in. So maybe we'll tackle the one that's just come in. So will AI make cybersecurity attacks worse?
Yeah, probably, right? I mean, I think criminals are really good at taking advantage of new technology, and you know, it's funny when you talk about organized crime, like I think people will see a lot in Hollywood and they sort of assume like it's a sort of glitzy thing, and it's actually not, but they're super organized. I was talking to somebody and they were a victim of a ransomware attack, and I remember them saying, like, I picked up the phone and I called the number that they gave me and they answered right away, right? I didn't go to hold, right? Your call's not important to us. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Like, I talked to a person and they were very nice and they were super helpful. Like, if they were on Yelp, I'd have given them 5 stars. Organized crime is very organized, and they're already taking advantage of artificial intelligence. And
I guess if you need support when you're trying to send your ransom, that's something that the kidnappers are keen to provide.
yeah, they're great. I mean, they've got a great partner program. They've, you know, if English is your second language and you need someone to proof it, they get a guy. If you don't know how to launder money, they get a group that does that.
One for English. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they are certainly taking advantage of AI. I think, you know, on the vendor side, they are too, right? So it's really just who gets there quicker and who can take advantage of the new technology fastest.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think your role, correct me if I'm wrong, is you have to understand all these weaknesses and vulnerabilities almost as well as the bad actors. You know, so there's kind of a fine line. You're both doing the same job, but you're on different sides.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you do, right? I sort of jokingly say I get paid to be a bad guy, or think like a bad guy and act like a good guy, right? Like, you definitely got to be a little bit paranoid.
Yeah.
And you know, when I worked at Liberty, we had a team that would literally do these tabletops, and we would strategize, like, okay, if you were a bad person, what would you do? Like, what would your first attack be? And how much, you know, my favorite one was, how much money would you need to feel comfortable that you would get away with it? And I'm like, I never really thought about it. I don't know, 30 million bucks. And one of the guys like, oh, you don't need that much. You're old, which I thought was a little hurtful. Probably not wrong, but he had a whole plan. He's like, I need $10.8 million. I'm going to go to this country because they don't extradite for white collar crime. And like, he had a full plan. Like, I suddenly felt ill prepared.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's maybe it's a way for our members to have some kind of team building exercise. They could get everyone in a room and get them to brainstorm, ransom hack attempts and what's the worst thing that could go wrong with our cybersecurity. That'd be kind of fun. Jennifer, do you have any other questions?
Yes. So it didn't come as a question. It came as a statement. Red team, blue team. I'm curious to know what that's about.
That's a Matrix reference.
Yeah, it's actually, I think it comes from military exercises. Red teams were usually the opposing force, right? Who's out to get you? Blue team was sort of the defender. So in the cyber world, so attackers versus the security team, a lot of companies would do red team versus blue team exercises.
Okay.
They tended to get pretty competitive. And what would happen is the red team would find out about an exploit and save it until the next exercise so that they would win, which is clearly not the behavior that we were looking for. So most companies now do what's called purple team, where it's not one team versus the other. It's, we're going to try this attack. We want to make sure that you saw it or that you protected against it. So sort of more cooperative than competitive. So
very interesting. Jennifer?
Sure. So I don't know what these acronyms mean. Can you address the growth of SLMs versus LLMs and use cases?
Yeah, so that's an AI term. So LLMs are large language models, things like ChatGPT, which I think a lot of people have probably heard of, or Microsoft Copilot. They use these models that are built on huge amounts of data. Small language models, or SLMs, use less data. LLMs are pretty amazing. It's been a while since I dabbled in AI. When I worked at Liberty, I was responsible for security for emerging technologies, which is an amazing gig because everything's 5 years out. You have 5 years for people to figure out. You have no idea what you're talking about. And then you can kind of shrug your shoulders and say, well, technology changes. So I built some AI stuff back in 2018. LLM wasn't available then, so it was a smaller language model. But it was really accurate. I sort of stole the concept of movie references, right? Is it a good recommendation or a bad recommendation, right? And retrained it on security comments. So it was smart enough to figure out if you said, I'm going to build this without passwords because passwords are too hard, that's probably not good from a security perspective. So you'd score lowly or poorly. And we used it with sort of run against what developers were talking about, and we could use that to identify if they were doing something that would probably be bad later. We could sort of catch it early. It was pretty accurate. It was 93% accurate. But that's all it did, right? ChatGPT, Copilot, you can ask them literally anything, and they will come back usually with a really good answer. Now, sometimes they come back with catastrophically bad answers. So you got to be a little bit careful, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting space. And in my head, as AI gets better and as these models get better, we're going to see a lot of changes in the way things work.
So, and one thing that came up is how this could be used for more sophisticated phishing attempts. For example, deep faking video content or audio content. So if there are programs out there that could fake an audio clip from a family member, for example, and send it, so I mean that seems like it's the step beyond, hey, this is the CEO, can you pick up $1,000 of PlayStation vouchers?
It's terrifying, right? Because you can, without a lot of information. So when deepfakes first came out, I played around with these again 5 or 6 years ago. You needed a lot of video, right? You needed 20 hours of video to make a convincing video deepfake. You needed a couple of hours of somebody talking to get a voice that sort of sounded like them. Wasn't great, but it was pretty good. Took a long time to process it, and it was pretty expensive. Not that big nation states couldn't do it, but normal organized crime probably was a little bit beyond them. Nowadays, audio, it's something like 10 seconds of audio. You can recreate somebody's voice, and video is 10 minutes, 9 minutes. So literally they can make a fake Steve now. if they just download this video. But
Probably
it's,
better than the real one.
well, we'll leave that up to interpretation. But yeah, it's terrifying because one of the things I heard is criminals were calling people's houses and keeping the children on the call long enough to get 9 seconds of video. They would then use that fake model to call their parents and say, "Oh my God, I've been kidnapped. You need to send blah to this person." Like, who wouldn't do that, right? I don't even have kids, and I know people are going to do that. And so a lot of families have sort of come up with, here's the secret password that you have to say if you're really in trouble.
Yeah.
But
So you have to fill every voice note with watermelon.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the other thing is context matters too, right? And I sort of jokingly tell this story, even with email, whether it's email or video or audio. Like if somebody's acting really out of character, it's okay to question it. We had a CEO, he was an engineer by trade, and maybe wasn't as relatable to people as somebody in sales would be, right?
Oh, come on. I never hear that about CEOs.
Yeah, shocking. But he was really trying, right? He's a great CEO, and I love the guy.
Yeah.
And so one day, again, he was trying to be like more relatable, and the local grocery store, local 7-Eleven had slushy day. And so he's trying to be more friendly, so he sends an email to the whole company and says, "Hey, just wanted you to know, it's slushy day. You should stop and get one." And I probably had like 10 people like, I think his email just got hacked because this is clearly not him.
Yeah, right. He offered 1,000 people a slushy.
But I mean, but you want people to be comfortable questioning things like that, right? Whether it's please send me $1,000 worth of PlayStation gift cards, or, can you send me this? Can you update this? If the CEO doesn't normally ask you that, you need a culture where it's okay to say, I don't think so. Like, Steve, this doesn't sound like you. Like, let's talk.
Yeah, and you almost need to have to deliver that message on day one, because any other day might be too late.
Well, and it's funny because they actually look at LinkedIn, and so company gets a new CEO, everyone's an open target. You're a new intern or a new employee, good person to target.
That's where they get the okay, right. I didn't put two and two together. That's interesting. Jeff, you're country head for Brava here. Have you ever offered to buy everyone a slushie?
I have not done that quite yet.
That's why they think they're not very relatable.
It's more because I don't know where to get slushes in Cayman.
That's true. We just call them smoothies.
Yeah, right.
An iced coffee might go down quite well.
Maybe there's a business opportunity there.
Any other questions?
Actually, we have another question that came in during registration, and I think it's a great question to wrap up with, which is, okay, what kind of attacks are going to come in the future? What do we have to look forward to?
Interesting. And can you take this in? Because one thing we didn't get to cover that I really wanted to talk about was pen testing. Is there any way to tie these questions together?
Let's take them separately. So, pen testing is interesting, right? Because that is essentially sort of like red teaming, a little bit different, but multiple flavors of pen testing. You can do internal pen testing where you pretend to be an employee.
I suppose we should explain that this is penetration testing. It's basically just trying to reveal vulnerabilities in your system, but by friendly actors. Yep.
They're actually a lot of fun, right? Because you get to learn new things as a typically a law-abiding citizen, right? I wouldn't do a lot of the things that we do in a pen test. Right. So it's fun. Get a chance to put on a different face and act like a bad person. How would I break in? And you can do internal, where you pretend to be an internal employee, and what could somebody get to. You can do external. If I didn't know anything about the company, like how would I get started and where would I go look? And both of them are incredibly valuable. And I think somebody asked me once, like, how much pen testing is enough? And the answer is, it's kind of like any other testing, right? Like, you need to spend enough to be comfortable, but you're almost certainly never going to find everything.
Yeah.
So again, depends on how paranoid you are. And sometimes
isn't there some local regulation on this, Jeff?
Yeah, that's so part of the statement of guidance that SEMA put forward. That is one of the recommendations, of course, as part of the statement of guidance, is to have multiple pen tests in a calendar year. So that, again, is another part of our core kind of stronghold offering, is delivering those services as well. And that's kind of Rich was alluding to, whether it's internal or external pen test, certainly part of the service offering as well.
And this, I recall this was a question that we used to get at CML as well. We used to get questions from when we were doing vendor onboarding. We used to get questions about how frequently we did pen testing. So it's kind of everybody wants to secure the very outer reach of the boundary of their own data.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's that's typically, aside from doing vulnerability assessments and scorecards, a lot of times that's one of the early engagements that we're engaging with customers right now, is if they already have a presence in an operations, it's coming in, engaging and doing a pen test to identify what some of those vulnerabilities are. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Rich, I mean, I know there was one question that we didn't get to, but I really wanted to ask you, do you only use your powers for good? Were you ever tempted to enact some retribution on a rival?
No. Funny story. So when I was like 5 years old, we were grocery shopping with my family. We lived far away from the store, so we'd go as a family every week. And I was 5, and clearly my parents weren't paying as much attention to me as they should have, because they were checking out. And I ran to the soda machine and I hit the button, and a soda came out. And I was 5, like I was pretty excited, right? So I grabbed a can and went over, look what I got, look what I got. He's like,
happy day.
Yeah, where'd you get that? Like, where'd the money come from? Because clearly I'm 5, I don't have any money.
Yeah.
Like I hit the button, it came out. He's like, if you didn't pay for it, it's not yours. Like, put it back. And so I remember that all the time. Like, if it's not yours, don't touch it. So no, never saw the need. I think at the end of the day, I think that happens less than people think. I mean, it looks great in the news, but companies tend to win based on the value that they think is the most important. And if your customers align with those values, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And someone can't necessarily replicate that, right? So no, I've only ever been good.
How about you, Jeff? Do you have any powers that you could, or did
I've got many powers.
You have many powers, but only ever used for good. In my experience,
yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure, gents. Our time together flew by. I want to say thank you to Brava and our friends Rich Casselberry and Jeff Hart for joining us, and thank you everyone who's tuned in and shared their lunch whilst watching us today, and look forward to seeing you on the next Cayman Finance webinar. Thank you.
Really appreciate it, Steve. Thank you. And then just in closing, I did want to say that every participant, Cayman Finance member, we actually are throwing out a $500 credit towards a penetration test. So feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And isn't a review of the cybersecurity environment free?
Yes. So yeah, that's a very good point. So that, as part of a first discovery engagement, we do include that as part of the vulnerability assessment scorecard.
So first thing I said is, let's get you guys in, and you're going to test our cybersecurity environment. But don't get Rich on it, because he's too good. You want someone who's you're going to say, no, couldn't find any issues. All right. Thank you very much, gents.
Thanks again.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
It's been great getting valuable insights from both sides of the coin, the security professional and the CEO who runs a day-to-day business, on this topic of cybersecurity, which we all know is at the top of everyone's minds. Thank you to the guys, and thank you for joining us.